Hey, you, the waitress. Your break's over. Get back to the kitchen.
I'm not a waitress. I'm a guest.
Then get up anyway. Your stench is ruining everyone's appetite.
I have a reservation.
Victoria's smile dropped.
A reservation? You think a reservation makes you one of us?
She picked up Brielle's wine glass and poured it straight down the front of her dress.
There. Now the outside matches the inside.
Vicky, stop wasting good wine on a stray. That bottle costs more than her whole life.
Preston Caldwell didn't even glance over. The jazz stopped. 60 forks went still. Not one person in that room said a word. Brielle sat there, wine dripping off her chin, hands steady, eyes locked on Victoria. But what this family just did, in front of all those witnesses, was the beginning of the fastest downfall in American business history. Let's rewind. 6 hours before that wine hit Brielle Townsend's dress, she was standing barefoot in her kitchen, a 2-bedroom apartment in Brooklyn. Not a penthouse, not a townhouse, a regular apartment with a cracked tile by the fridge and a coffee maker that took 3 tries to start. On the counter, a stack of legal documents thick enough to stop a door. Acquisition paperwork. 14 months of negotiations, audits, and shareholder meetings compressed into one final signature page. Brielle signed it with a ballpoint pen. Not a Mont Blanc. Not a ceremony. Just ink on paper, coffee getting cold beside her. That signature made her the sole controlling owner of Caldwell Hospitality Group, a 12-property restaurant and hotel empire worth $800 million. Flagship location, Maison Caldwell, Upper East Side, Manhattan. 2 Michelin stars, a 60-year legacy built by 3 generations of Caldwells. And now, it belonged to her. But here's the thing about Brielle Townsend. She didn't grow up in boardrooms. She grew up on the south side of Chicago, in a 1-bedroom apartment she shared with her mother, Diane. Diane Townsend worked double shifts as a waitress at a diner off Halsted Street, 5 days a week, sometimes 6. Brielle remembers sitting in a booth after school doing homework while her mother carried plates back and forth, her shoes warm through at the soles. By 16, Brielle was waiting tables too. Same diner, same worn shoes. She'd work the dinner rush, close out at 11, then study until 2 in the morning. Her SAT prep book had grease stains on every page. She got into Northwestern on a full scholarship, graduated top of her class. Then Wharton for her MBA, where one professor told her, to her face, that she was only there because of a diversity quota. She didn't argue. She just outperformed every single person in that room for 2 straight years. At 28, she founded Pinnacle Ventures with 2 employees and a rented desk in a shared office in Midtown. 6 years later, her firm managed $2.8 billion in assets. Not family money, not a lucky break. Every single dollar traced back to deals she sourced, negotiated, and closed herself. But tonight wasn't about business. Brielle pulled up a photo on her phone. Her mother, Diane, taken at that same diner, maybe 1998, apron-stained, hair pulled back, a tired smile. She'd died 4 years ago, heart attack at 59. Never saw her daughter's name on a building, never saw the Forbes profile, never knew. Brielle stared at the photo for a long time, then she put on a simple black dress. No labels, no jewelry except a thin gold chain her mother gave her for graduation. She looked in the mirror and saw exactly what she wanted the world to see tonight. Just a woman going to dinner, because that was the plan. Before the deal went public Monday morning, Brielle wanted to walk into Maison Caldwell one time as nobody. Sit down, order food, watch how the staff moved, see who got respect and who didn't when there were no cameras, no press releases, no power suits in the room. She wanted the truth, The version of that restaurant the Caldwell family showed when they thought nobody important was watching. Her driver dropped her off at 8:15. The Upper East Side in late October. Cold air, gold light spilling out of restaurant windows, couples in long coats walking arm in arm. Maison Caldwell sat on the corner of East 72nd and Madison. Polished brass doors, a doorman in a three-piece suit. The kind of place where the wine list had more pages than most novels. Inside, amber light, white tablecloths, a live jazz quartet playing something soft in the corner. Every table full. The crowd was almost entirely white, old money, corporate money. The kind of people who didn't look at prices because looking was beneath them. And in the far corner, the Caldwell family table, permanently reserved. Preston Caldwell sat at the head, loud, laughing, commanding the room like he owned it, which, until Monday morning, he technically still did. Victoria adjusted flowers on the table like she was staging a magazine shoot. Their son Garrett was on his third cocktail, scrolling his phone, bored with everything around him. Brielle walked in alone. The hostess smiled, polite, but her eyes did that quick sweep, up, down, a half-second pause. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, table 9, under Adams." The hostess checked, found it, seated her. Brielle ordered a glass of red wine and opened the menu. She had no idea that in less than an hour, she'd be wearing that wine instead of drinking it. It started with Garrett. He noticed Brielle about 15 minutes after she sat down. Hard not to. She was one of maybe 3 black faces in the entire restaurant, and the only one not wearing a uniform. Garrett leaned back in his chair, swirling his bourbon, watching her the way a cat watches something it hasn't decided to chase yet. Then he stood up. "Where are you going?" Victoria asked. "Relax, Mom. Just being friendly." He straightened his jacket, a $6,000 Tom Ford that didn't fit right because Garrett had the kind of body that expensive clothes couldn't save, and walked over to Brielle's table. He slid into the empty chair across from her without asking. "Hey." Brielle looked up from her menu. "Can I help you?" "I was going to ask you the same thing." He smiled. That smile. The one rich boys learn early, part charm, part ownership. "You look like you could use some company, sitting here all alone." "I'm fine, thank you." "Come on. Pretty girl, empty table, Saturday night. Let me buy you a drink." "I already ordered one." "Then let me buy the next one." "I appreciate it, but I'm good." The smile stayed, but something behind his eyes shifted. That micro-expression men make when they hear the word no, and their brain doesn't know how to file it. He leaned forward. "You know this is my family's restaurant, right? My dad owns this place. Everything you're looking at, the chairs, the glasses, the food you're about to eat, that's Caldwell. That's us." Brielle set down her menu. "I'm aware." "So when I say, 'let me buy you a drink,' that's not really a question." Brielle held his gaze. "And when I say no, that's not really a negotiation." Garrett's jaw tightened. He sat back, looked her over again, but different this time. Not flirting anymore. Assessing. The way his father looked at things. He was deciding whether to buy or discard. "You know what? Forget it." He stood up, adjusting his jacket. "I don't even know why I walked over here. You're not exactly the type we cater to." He said that last part louder, loud enough for the tables nearby to hear. Brielle said nothing. She picked up her wine glass and took a sip. Garrett walked back to the family table. Victoria noticed his expression immediately. "What happened?" "Nothing, just some waitress sitting in the guest section acting like she belongs here." Victoria's eyes snapped to Brielle, narrowed. Then she turned to Preston. "Preston, look at table 9. Preston looked. He didn't see a person. He saw a problem. "Who seated her there?" "That's what I'd like to know," Victoria said. Right next to our section? This close to our guests? It's embarrassing. Preston set down his fork, dabbed the corner of his mouth with a napkin. Then he stood. 6'2", silver hair, navy suit tailored to the millimeter. Preston Caldwell walked like a man who'd never once in his life been told he was in the wrong room. Because he never had been. He stopped at Brielle's table. Didn't sit, didn't smile, just looked down at her. "Ma'am." Brielle looked up. "Good evening. I'm going to be straightforward with you. This section is reserved for our private guests. I don't know how you ended up here, but I'm going to need you to move." "The hostess seated me here. I have a reservation." "I don't care what the hostess did. I'm telling you, this table is not available." "The restaurant confirmed this table 2 days ago." Preston's patience was a performance, and the curtain was dropping fast. He turned and snapped his fingers, actually snapped his fingers, at the floor manager. A white guy, mid-30s, already sweating through his shirt. "Connor, come here." Connor hustled over. "Yes, Mr. Caldwell?" "Why is this woman sitting at table 9? This is 4 feet from our party. Who approved this?" Connor's eyes bounced between Preston and Brielle. "Sir, she has a valid reservation. The system assigned—" "I don't care what the system says. I care what I see. And what I see is a problem. Fix it." Connor turned to Brielle. His face said everything his mouth was too scared to say. "I'm sorry, but I can't help you." "Ma'am, would you be comfortable moving to a table in the back? We have a lovely spot near the kitchen," Brielle said. "No, I'm comfortable here. Thank you." Preston stepped closer. His voice dropped. Not quieter. Heavier. "Let me make this simple. My family has owned this restaurant for 31 years. I decide who sits where. And I'm deciding that you don't sit here." "On what basis?" "On the basis that I said so." "That's not a basis. That's a preference." The temperature in the room shifted. Diners at nearby tables had stopped pretending not to listen. Forks were down. Conversations paused. The jazz quartet played on, but nobody was hearing the music. Victoria appeared at Preston's shoulder. She'd been watching from the family table, and whatever she saw in Preston's face told her he wasn't finishing this fast enough. "Oh, for God's sake, Preston, stop negotiating. She's not a shareholder. She's not a guest. She's just some girl who wandered in off the street and doesn't know when to leave." Victoria turned to Brielle, full eye contact. The kind of look designed to make someone feel small enough to disappear. "Sweetheart, I don't know what fantasy you're living in, but this isn't your world. This restaurant is for people who built something, not people who serve people who built something." Brielle didn't blink. "And which one are you, Mrs. Caldwell? The one who built something, or the one who married someone who did?" The room held its breath. Victoria's face went white, then red. Her lips pressed into a line so tight they disappeared. Nobody talked to Victoria Caldwell like that. Not her staff, not her friends, not her own son. And certainly not a black woman in a $50 dress sitting at a two-top near the bar. Victoria reached across the nearest table, picked up a bread plate, and dropped it in front of Brielle with a ceramic crack. "If you insist on staying, make yourself useful. Clear the table." Brielle looked at the bread plate, then at Victoria. Then she gently pushed it aside, picked up her menu, and continued reading. "I'll have the duck, I think." Behind the bar, 20 feet away, half hidden by the espresso machine, a 26-year-old waitress named Sophie Emerson watched everything. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from anger. She pulled out her phone, pressed record. Nobody noticed. What happened next took less than 10 minutes. But for Brielle Townsend, sitting in that chair with 60 pairs of eyes on her, every second stretched like an hour. Preston pulled out his phone. Right there. standing 5 feet from Brielle's table. He didn't whisper, didn't step away. He wanted her to hear every word. "Tommy, it's Preston. Yeah, I know it's Saturday. Listen, I need a unit at the restaurant. We've got a situation. Black female, mid-30s, refusing to leave the premises. She's disrupting our guests, causing a scene, and I want her removed. 10 minutes? Make it 5. He hung up, looked at Brielle. There, that should simplify things. Brielle's expression didn't change. You called the police because I'm eating dinner. I called the police because you're trespassing. I have a reservation. You have a problem, and it's about to walk through that door in a uniform. Preston turned his back on her, walked back to the family table, sat down, picked up his fork, resumed eating like nothing had happened. Victoria wasn't done. She snapped at Connor, the floor manager, who was standing frozen near the bar, pretending to check a receipt. Connor, remove her place setting. Connor looked up. I'm sorry? Her glass, her silverware, her napkin. Take it all. She is not a guest. Stop treating her like one. Connor's hands were trembling. He looked at Brielle. She looked back at him. She didn't nod. She didn't shake her head. She just looked at him. And in that look was a question. What are you going to do? Connor walked to her table. His voice was barely a whisper. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. He picked up her wine glass, her fork, her knife, the napkin, one by one, placed them on a tray, left the bare white tablecloth, empty except for the bread plate Victoria had thrown down. Brielle sat at a stripped table in a packed restaurant. No glass, no silverware, nothing. Garrett thought this was the funniest thing he'd ever seen. He tilted his chair back, pulled out his phone, and hit record. Yo, check this out. He was narrating, filming Brielle like she was content. This lady really thinks she can sit in a Michelin star restaurant and just stay, like a cockroach that won't leave. Bro, someone, please, call an exterminator. He zoomed in on the wine stains starting to set on the tablecloth, laughed, showed it to Victoria, who smirked. Brielle heard every word. Her jaw tightened, the only sign, the smallest crack. But she didn't turn around, didn't give him the angle. Then Victoria delivered the final blow. She walked to her table, picked up her glass, a $400 Bordeaux nearly full, and carried it to Brielle. She stood over her. The way you stand over something you're about to throw away. You know what? I've been thinking. You came here for the full experience, right? Let me give it to you. She tilted the glass, slowly, poured it directly over Brielle's head. Red wine ran through her hair, down her forehead, over her cheeks. It soaked into the collar of her black dress, pooled on her shoulders, dripped off her chin onto the tablecloth in dark red circles. The entire restaurant gasped. A woman at table 4 covered her mouth. A man near the window stood up, then sat back down. Phones came out at 3, 4, 5 tables. Victoria set the empty glass down on Brielle's table, gently, like she was placing a period at the end of a sentence. There. Now the outside matches the inside. The jazz quartet had stopped. The only sound was wine dripping from Brielle's chin onto the marble floor. Drip, drip, drip. Brielle closed her eyes. 2 seconds. 3. When she opened them, they were dry, steady, locked on Victoria. Are you finished? Victoria blinked. That wasn't the reaction she wanted. She wanted tears, wanted a scene, wanted this woman to crumble so she could point at the mess and say, "See? This is why they don't belong here." But Brielle didn't crumble. She sat there, wine dripping off her face, with more composure than anyone in the Caldwell family had shown all night. Then, The police walked in. Two uniformed officers, mid-40s, one tall, one stocky. They entered through the front door, and the room split. Diners leaned back in their chairs, making way, watching like this was the third act of something they couldn't stop. Preston was already on his feet. He met the officers halfway, hand extended like he was greeting golf buddies. "Officers, thank you for coming. She's right over there, the one covered in wine." The taller officer looked at Brielle, wine-soaked, sitting at a bare table, surrounded by well-dressed white diners who looked anywhere but at her. "Ma'am, can you stand up for me?" Brielle stood. Wine dripped from her dress onto her shoes. "Can you tell me what's going on here?" "I made a reservation. I came to eat dinner. I've been here for 45 minutes. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't touched anyone. That woman," she looked at Victoria, "poured wine on me. Twice. That man," she looked at Preston, "called you to remove me because I wouldn't give up my table." The officer turned to Preston. "Sir, is this your establishment?" "It's my family's restaurant, yes, and she's trespassing." "She says she has a reservation." "I don't care what she says. I want her out." The officer paused, looked at his partner. A silent conversation passed between them, the kind cops have when they know the situation is wrong, but the path of least resistance is clear. "Ma'am, the property owner is asking you to leave. If you don't comply, we'll have to escort you out." "I understand." Brielle's voice didn't shake. "I'll leave. But I want both your badge numbers and your names." The officers exchanged another look. The stocky one shifted his weight. Brielle pulled her phone from her purse, slowly, deliberately, making sure everyone saw it was just a phone, and typed their badge numbers into her notes. "Thank you." She walked toward the front door, past the family table where Garrett was still filming, past the 60 diners who watched a woman get wine poured on her head and did nothing, past the jazz quartet, standing with their instruments at their sides, past Connor, the floor manager, who couldn't meet her eyes. At the door, she paused, turned around, looked at the room one last time. Nobody looked back. She stepped out into the cold October air, wine-stained, alone, head high. On the sidewalk, a black town car pulled up. Her driver opened the door. Brielle got in, closed her eyes for 3 seconds, then pulled out her phone. She called Nina Ashford. Nina picked up on the first ring. "How is dinner?" "Move the press release up. I want the acquisition public by 9 a.m. Monday." "Brielle, that's 36 hours. We were planning for Wednesday." "Monday, 9 a.m. And Nina, pull everything. HR complaints, health code violations, employee discrimination filings, insurance audits, all of it. I want a full picture by tomorrow night." "What happened?" Brielle looked out the window, Maison Caldwell's gold sign glowing against the dark street. "I found out exactly how they treat people when nobody important is watching." She paused. "And Nina, one more thing. I'm not saving this company anymore. I'm cleaning it out." Sunday was quiet. Brielle spent the day in her apartment with Nina Ashford and Derek Collinson, her CFO. The dining table was covered in documents, 14 months of acquisition work condensed into folders, tabs, and sticky notes. Nina had worked through the night. By noon Sunday, she had everything. 43 formal discrimination complaints filed by employees of color across Caldwell properties over the past 15 years. Every single one marked "resolved internally." Not one resulted in disciplinary action. Not one. Payroll records showing Black and Latino kitchen staff earning 22% less than white counterparts in the same roles. 0 Black employees promoted to management at any of the 12 properties in the entire history of the company. And a health inspection from 2019 that should have shut down 2 locations. It didn't. The inspector's name matched a guest entry in Preston Caldwell's private club records. 3 visits, 2 bottles of scotch. No violations reported. Nina laid it all out on the table. This isn't just bad culture, Brielle. This is a pattern. Federal-level pattern. Good. Hold everything until after Monday. Derek looks up from his laptop. The board meeting is confirmed for 9 a.m. All 7 directors will be present. Preston, Victoria, and Garrett are all expected. Do they know I'll be there? No. The agenda lists it as a quarterly review with a note about shareholder restructuring. Preston's assistant confirmed he barely read the email. Brielle nodded. He wouldn't. He's never had to worry about who owns what. It's always been his. She looked at the wine stain still visible on the black dress hanging on the back of her bathroom door. She hadn't washed it. Not yet. Let's go take his chair. Monday morning, 9 a.m. Caldwell Hospitality Group headquarters, a glass and limestone tower on West 57th Street. The boardroom sat on the 32nd floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, a long mahogany table, 12 leather chairs. A portrait of Preston's father, Theodore Caldwell, hanging on the far wall, the man who founded the company in 1962. By 8:45, the room was filling up. Board members took their usual seats. Coffee was poured. Small talk about the weekend, the markets, someone's new boat. At 8:50, 3 people walked in that nobody recognized. Nina Ashford, navy suit, black briefcase. She nodded at the board members but didn't introduce herself. She took a seat at the far end of the table, the end usually empty. Derek Collinson followed, gray suit, laptop under his arm. He sat beside Nina and opened the laptop without a word. A third Pinnacle executive, a woman named Claire Buchanan, head of operations, entered and stood near the door. The board members exchanged looks. Preston's assistant leaned over to one of the directors. I don't know who these people are. They weren't on the list. At 8:58, Preston, Victoria, and Garrett walked in. Preston owned the room before he even sat down. Loud voice, big handshake. He clapped a board member on the shoulder, laughed at something no one else found funny, and pulled out his chair at the head of the table. Victoria sat behind him in a row of guest chairs along the wall. She crossed her legs, adjusted her bracelet, and started scrolling her phone. Garrett dropped into a chair at the far end, already bored. 9 a.m. The boardroom doors opened one more time. Brielle Townsend walked in. Navy suit, tailored, hair pulled back, gold chain around her neck, the same one she wore Saturday night. The only piece of jewelry she ever wore. She walked the full length of the table. Didn't rush, didn't hesitate. Every board member watched her. She pulled out the chair at the head of the table, directly across from Preston, and sat down. Preston stared. He didn't recognize her, not at first, not in the suit, not in this building, not in his chair. Then Victoria made a sound, a small, sharp inhale, like someone stepping on glass. She recognized the face. Preston looked at his wife, then back at Brielle. And then it hit him. The restaurant. The wine. Saturday night. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Nina stood. Good morning. My name is Nina Ashford, Chief Counsel for Pinnacle Ventures. As of 6 a.m. this morning, Pinnacle Ventures has completed its acquisition of a controlling 68% stake in Caldwell Hospitality Group. All regulatory approvals were finalized Friday. Every legal requirement has been met. She placed a bound acquisition document on the table, slid it toward Preston. Ms. Brielle Townsend, CEO and founder of Pinnacle Ventures, is now the majority owner of this company. Silence, the kind that has weight. Brielle spoke, calm, clear, looking directly at Preston. We've met before, Mr. Caldwell. Saturday evening, Your restaurant. You might remember, you called the police to have me removed. Preston's hand was gripping the edge of the table. His knuckles were white. Garrett's phone slipped out of his hand and clattered on the mahogany. That was... Garrett stammered. That was me. Brielle didn't raise her voice. The woman your mother poured wine on? The woman your father called a stray? The woman you filmed and called a cockroach? She paused. Let it sit. I know my place, Garrett. It's right here. Victoria stood up from the guest chairs. This is ridiculous. Preston, call Richard. Call the lawyers. They can't just... Nina didn't look at Victoria. Mrs. Caldwell, I'd encourage you to sit down. The acquisition is legally binding. There is no challenge. There is no injunction. It's done. Victoria sat. Brielle laid 3 folders on the table. Effective immediately, Preston Caldwell is removed as chairman of the board. Garrett Caldwell is terminated as VP of Operations, and I am ordering a full internal investigation into discriminatory employment practices across all 12 Caldwell properties. She looked around the table. Every board member was frozen. This company was built on the belief that certain people don't belong. I'm going to rebuild it on the belief that everyone does. She pressed a button on the conference phone. Security, this is Brielle Townsend. Please send a team to the 32nd floor boardroom. We have 2 former employees who need to be escorted from the building. Preston stood. His chair scraped against the floor. His face was the color of ash. You can't do this! Brielle looked up at him. I already did. 2 security guards appeared at the door. Preston looked at them, looked at the board members who wouldn't meet his eyes, looked at his son who had nothing to say for the first time in his life. Preston and Garrett were escorted out. Victoria was waiting in the lobby. She saw them come through the elevator doors. Preston with no briefcase, Garrett with no badge, flanked by security. Her scream echoed off the marble walls. Nobody stopped to look. The Caldwell family had never been told no, not by employees, not by business partners, not by banks, regulators, or city officials. For 30 years, the Caldwell name opened every door in Manhattan. By Monday afternoon, every single one of those doors was closing. Preston's first call was to Richard Hamill, the family's attorney for 2 decades. Corner office on Park Avenue, billable rate that could fund a small school. Preston was pacing his living room, phone pressed to his ear, voice shaking between rage and disbelief. Richard, this woman, this nobody, walked into my boardroom and took my company. I want an injunction. I want this reversed by end of day. Richard had already received a copy of the acquisition documents, couriered from Mina Ashford's office at 7 a.m. He'd been reading them for 3 hours. Preston, sit down. I don't want to sit down. I want my company back. Sit down and listen to me carefully. Richard's voice was flat. She acquired your debt through 6 shell purchases over 14 months. She accumulated stock through 3 separate brokerage accounts. She secured 5 of your 7 board members' votes before you even knew her name. The regulatory filings are clean. The SEC disclosures are timely. Every single step was legal. There has to be something. There isn't. I've been doing this for 34 years, Preston. This is the most airtight acquisition I've ever seen. Whoever her counsel is, they didn't leave a thread to pull. Silence. You don't own Caldwell Hospitality anymore. She does. And if you challenge this publicly, the only thing you'll accomplish is making the story bigger. Preston hung up without saying goodbye. Victoria's approach was different. She didn't call lawyers. She called journalists. By Tuesday morning, she'd reached out to 3 media contacts, people who'd covered Caldwell charity events, who'd been guests at Victoria's dinner parties, who owed her favors. Her pitch was simple. Brielle Townsend was a corporate raider. a predator. She'd used deceptive tactics to steal a family business from an American institution. Victoria wanted the narrative framed as a hostile takeover by an outsider, and she didn't need to say what she meant by outsider. The first journalist, a business columnist at the New York Post, made 2 phone calls, one to Pinnacle Ventures' media office, one to a former Caldwell employee. He called Victoria back within an hour. "Victoria, I'm not running this story, and if I were you, I'd stop making these calls. What I'm hearing about your family's employee record is going to be the story, not the acquisition." The second journalist didn't call back at all. The third one did, but not to help. She was an investigative reporter. She'd been looking into Caldwell hospitality for months after a tip from a former line cook. Victoria's call just confirmed the story was worth chasing. Garrett tried a different angle. He posted a 45-second video on his Instagram. Suit, slicked hair, speaking directly to camera. "My family built Caldwell Hospitality from the ground up. 3 generations, 60 years. And now someone who has zero connection to this legacy has come in and stolen it through financial manipulation. This is corporate theft, plain and simple. We will be fighting this." The video got 200,000 views in 6 hours, but the comments weren't what Garrett expected. Because by Tuesday afternoon, Sophie Emerson had uploaded her video. 3 minutes and 41 seconds. Shot from behind the bar at Maison Caldwell, the audio was clear. The footage was steady. It showed everything. Victoria calling Brielle a stray, Preston calling the police. The wine. First, the glass poured on her dress, then the second glass poured over her head. Garrett filming and laughing. The stripped table. The officers walking Brielle out while 60 people watched in silence. Sophie posted it with one line. "This is how the Caldwell family treats people when they think nobody's recording." 4 million views in 48 hours. 8 million by the end of the week. The comments were a flood. The hashtags started trending before midnight. Hashtag Justice for Brielle. Hashtag Maison Caldwell Racism. Hashtag She Owns Them. Hashtag Caldwell is over. News outlets picked it up by Wednesday morning. CNN, MSNBC, The New York Times. The contrast was devastating. A billion-dollar family pouring wine on a black woman who, at that very moment, already owned their entire company. Garrett deleted his Instagram video, but the internet had already screenshotted everything. Then the floodgates opened. Former employees started coming forward. Not 1 or 2, dozens. Current and former staff across all 12 Caldwell properties, speaking on camera, on podcasts, in print. A sous chef from the Brooklyn location. "I worked there for 4 years. Never saw a black employee make it past line cook. Not once." A former hostess from the Hamptons property. "Victoria once told me to seat black guests in the back corner because they, and I'm quoting her, bring down the ambiance." A maintenance worker who'd been at the company for 11 years. "You learn fast. Keep your head down. Don't make eye contact with the family. And if you're not white, don't expect a promotion. That's just how it worked." Sophie Emerson gave her first on-camera interview to NBC. She sat on a stool, hands folded, voice steady. "What they did to that woman Saturday night, that wasn't unusual. That was a regular Tuesday for them. The only difference was she was the first person who had the power to actually do something about it." The interviewer asked, "Were you scared to post the video?" Sophie paused. "I was terrified. I thought they'd sue me. I thought I'd never work in this industry again." She looked directly into the camera. "But I watched a woman sit in a chair while someone poured wine on her head, and she didn't flinch. If she could do that, I could press upload." Within 2 weeks, this wasn't a restaurant story anymore. It was a federal case. Brielle's team had turned over everything. The payroll records, the buried HR complaints, the health inspection cover-ups, to the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and the New York State Attorney General's office. The EEOC opened a formal investigation on a Thursday. By Friday, federal prosecutors had joined. Because what they found inside those files wasn't just discrimination. It was a system. 15 years of payroll data showed that Black and Latino employees across all 12 Caldwell properties were paid between 18 and 22% less than white employees in identical positions. Same hours, same roles, same responsibilities, different checks. Promotion records were worse. In the company's entire 60-year history, not one Black employee had ever been promoted to a management position. Not one. Across 12 properties, hundreds of staff, 6 decades, 0. The 43 discrimination complaints filed by employees of color had all been routed to the same internal HR director, a woman named Paula Greer, who reported directly to Preston. Every complaint followed the same path: filed, acknowledged, investigated internally, closed. No corrective action, no follow-up, no record of any findings, just a rubber stamp and a filing cabinet. But it was the health inspection records that caught the prosecutor's attention. 2 Caldwell locations, the Tribeca Steakhouse and the Midtown Hotel Restaurant, had failed city health inspections in 2019. Critical violations: rodent activity, improper food storage temperatures, cross-contamination risks. Those failures should have been public. They should have resulted in fines, mandatory closures, and re-inspections. They didn't. The inspector's name was Glenn Buckley, city employee, 23 years on the job. And his name appeared 3 times in Preston Caldwell's private club guest records. 2 bottles of single malt scotch, each worth $900, were charged to Preston's account and delivered to an address matching Buckley's home. No violations were ever reported. The restaurants stayed open. When federal investigators pulled Buckley in for questioning, he cooperated within 40 minutes. Full confession. He'd been accepting gifts from Preston for years. Not just scotch, but Knicks tickets, a weekend at the Caldwell family's Hamptons property, and a cash payment of $15,000 after the 2019 inspection. Preston Caldwell hadn't just run a discriminatory company. He'd bribed public officials to keep it running. Ray Dawson broke the story. Dawson was an investigative journalist at The Atlantic, 15 years of experience, 2 national magazine awards, and a reputation for dismantling institutions 1 document at a time. He'd been tracking the Caldwell family for 6 months before any of this happened. A tip from a former line cook had put him on the trail. Sophie's video accelerated his timeline by a year. His piece dropped on a Wednesday morning, 12,000 words. The Caldwell Legacy: 3 generations of racism behind Manhattan's most famous restaurant. 28 former employees interviewed on the record. Internal documents, financial records, payroll comparisons. A timeline of every buried complaint dating back to 2008. And one detail that nobody saw coming. Victoria Caldwell had operated a charitable foundation, the Caldwell Family Foundation, for 11 years. It claimed annual donations to youth education programs in underserved communities. Tax returns showed $600,000 in charitable disbursements per year. Dawson pulled the foundation's 990 filings and cross-referenced them with the listed recipient organizations. 4 of the 7 organizations didn't exist. The addresses were empty lots, P.O. boxes, and a storage unit in New Jersey. The remaining 3 were real nonprofits that confirmed they had never received a single dollar from the Caldwell Foundation. $6.6 million in fabricated charitable donations, used as tax deductions for over a decade. Victoria's charity was a fraud. The public reaction was volcanic. Hashtag Caldwell is over trended nationally for 3 straight days. Protest groups organized outside Caldwell properties in Manhattan, Brooklyn, and the Hamptons. Former employees held a press conference on the steps of City Hall, standing in a line, reading their experiences one by one into a microphone. Corporate partners severed ties within the week. The wine distributors, the linen companies, the PR firm that had managed the Caldwell brand for 15 years released a one-sentence statement. We no longer represent Caldwell Hospitality Group. 8 months later, Federal Courthouse, Southern District of New York. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The evidence was overwhelming. The defense, led by Richard Hamill, who'd taken the case despite his own advice, argued that Preston was a hands-off executive who delegated HR decisions and had no direct knowledge of discriminatory practices. The jury didn't buy it. Preston Caldwell was convicted on 3 counts of tax fraud, 2 counts of bribery of a public official, and 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct a federal investigation. The judge, a 61-year-old woman named Judge Dorothy Adler, delivered the sentence without emotion. 6 years in federal prison, $4.2 million in fines. Victoria Caldwell was convicted on 2 counts, accessory to tax fraud and filing false charitable returns through the foundation. 18 months in federal prison. 3 years of supervised probation upon release. Garrett Caldwell cut a deal. After the acquisition was announced, he'd gone into the Caldwell HR office at 2 in the morning and shredded 14 boxes of employee complaint records. Security cameras caught everything. He pleaded guilty to obstruction of justice and employment fraud. 2 years in federal prison. The Caldwell family was ordered to pay $11.5 million in restitution to affected employees, back pay, damages, and compensatory settlements distributed across all 12 properties. Sentencing day. Outside the courthouse, a cold spring morning. Preston walked out first, gray suit, no tie, wrists in cuffs. Reporters lined both sides of the steps. Camera shutters sounded like insects. He said nothing, stared straight ahead, walked to the waiting transport van. Victoria followed. She held a folder over her face. Her Valentino gown had been replaced by a gray pantsuit 2 sizes too big. The woman who once poured wine on a stranger's head to prove a point couldn't look a single camera in the eye. Garrett came last, handcuffs in front, head down. The boy who'd called Brielle a cockroach on camera had nothing to say when the cameras were pointed at him. 3 blocks away, in the newly renovated restaurant on East 72nd and Madison, no longer Maison Caldwell, Brielle Townsend watched the verdict on a television mounted behind the bar. The restaurant's new name was etched in gold on the front window, Townsend's. Brielle sat at table 9, the same table, the same chair. Sophie Emerson, no longer a waitress but the youngest floor manager in company history, walked over with a glass of red wine, set it down gently. Brielle looked at it, looked at Sophie. Sophie smiled. "This one's for drinking." Brielle picked up the glass, took a sip, set it down. Then she looked up at the television, watched Preston Caldwell disappear into a federal transport van. And she nodded, once, to no one in particular. 1 year later, the name Caldwell had disappeared from every awning, every menu, every business card in the company. Brielle didn't erase it out of spite. She erased it because it was time. Townsend Hospitality Collective. That was the new name. 12 properties, same locations, same kitchens. Different soul. The first thing Brielle changed wasn't the logo, or the furniture, or the wine list. It was the pay structure. Every employee across all 12 properties was audited. Every wage gap was closed. Black and Latino staff who'd been underpaid for years received full back pay restitution, some checks going back a decade. One dishwasher at the Tribeca location opened his envelope and found a check for $38,000. He called his wife from the break room. Couldn't get the words out. The second thing she changed was the promotion pipeline. She hired an outside firm to design a transparent advancement program. Every role, every requirement, every salary band published openly. No more backroom decisions. No more Preston Caldwell picking who got ahead based on the color of their skin. Within 8 months, 11 employees of color were promoted to management positions across the company. 11. After 60 years of zero. The third thing she built was the one that mattered most to her. She called it the Second Table Scholarship. Named after the experience of being told you don't deserve a seat. The program funded culinary school tuition, hospitality degrees, and small business grants for first-generation students of color. Fully funded, no strings, no repayment. The first class had 42 students. Brielle met every one of them on the first day, shook every hand, told them the same thing. Someone once told me I didn't belong at the table. So I bought the table. And now I'm adding chairs. Sophie Emerson was running the floor at Townsend's flagship restaurant, the same dining room where she'd once stood behind the bar, hands shaking, pressing record on her phone. She'd been promoted twice in 12 months. The staff didn't fear her. They respected her. There's a difference, and Sophie knew it because she'd lived on both sides. On a Tuesday night, 6 months after the trial, Brielle did something she hadn't done since the acquisition. She put on an apron. She walked into the kitchen at Townsend's during the dinner rush, didn't announce herself, didn't bring cameras, just tied the apron, washed her hands, and started plating beside the line cooks. The head chef, a Dominican woman named Elena Vargas, hired 3 months after the takeover, looked over and froze. "Ms. Townsend, you don't have to." "I know. I want to." Brielle plated for an hour, carried dishes to the pass, wiped down a station when it got backed up. The kitchen staff didn't know what to do at first. Then they just cooked, side by side. The CEO and the line. Same aprons, same rhythm. After the rush, Brielle stood by the back door. The same door Victoria once told her she should have used to enter. She looked out at the dining room. Full tables, laughter, a jazz quartet playing in the corner. A black family of 4 sat at table 9, 2 kids coloring on the paper menus, parents splitting a bottle of wine. Nobody was staring at them. Nobody was asking if they belonged. They were just eating dinner. Brielle watched them for a long time. Then she pulled out her phone, opened her photos, scrolled to the picture of her mother, Diane, in the diner, 1998. Apron-stained, tired smile. The woman who carried plates for 30 years and never once got to sit down in a place like this. Brielle looked at the photo, looked at the dining room. "We made it, Mom." So let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a room where someone was being treated like they didn't belong, and you had to decide whether to speak up or stay silent? What did you do? And if you could go back, would you do it differently? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. If this one hits you, drop a like. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you're not subscribed yet, hit that button and turn on the bell, because we've got more stories coming that'll make your jaw drop. Here's what the Caldwell family never understood. You can pour wine on someone's dress. You can call the police. You can snap your fingers and strip their table bare. You can laugh and film and tell them they don't belong. But you cannot take away what someone built with their own hands. And sometimes, just sometimes, the person you're looking down on is the same person who's about to sign your pink slip.
Here's what the Caldwell family never understood. You can humiliate someone in front of a room full of people. You can strip the table, call the police, pour wine on their head, but you cannot erase what someone knew when nobody was watching. Brielle didn't sit in that chair to fight back. She sat there to see the truth, and the Caldwell handed it to her, freely, proudly, without a second thought. That the thing about power, you are looking down at people, is only work as long as no one's looking up. 60 years, 3 generations, $800 million, and none of it could survive one evening of honestly, not because real destroyed them, but because they finally had to sit in the same room with who they really were. So here's what I can't stop thinking about. How many rooms are you sitting in right now, where someone is being treated like you don't belong, and everyone just keep eating? Whether it's taught you to stay silent, what would it take for you to be the one person who doesn't look away? Tell me in the comments if this story hit you. Drop a like and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe and hit the bell. We got more story coming that make your jaw drop.